Some people shouldn't be parents. One of the titles in this series is the terrible phenomenon of child abuse and the many different forms it takes. Some of the cases highlight strangers who abducted and murdered children. Generally speaking, these type of cases seem to resonate longer in the psyches of people because they invoke images of real-life monsters lurking around corners, waiting to nab any unsuspecting child. These are certainly terrible cases, but statistically speaking, they represent the minority of child murder cases. Most murders of children are committed by those closest to them, those who are entrusted to protect them. As mentioned in one of our previous videos, those who kill children do so for a number of reasons that may seem senseless to a well-adjusted person, but to the child killer they make perfect sense. Sometimes the parent is simply in over his or her head, while other times there is a financial motive. But sometimes children are murdered out of pure hatred over a period of several months or even years. Ame Lynn Deal was a little girl who never had a chance at life. She was born to an extended family of criminals, con artists, and other assorted losers who never accepted her into their demented fold. She was looked at by her father with derision and repeatedly abused by other family members for no conceivable reasons other than envy, hatred, and pure malice. Ame Lynn Deal's story is truly difficult to understand, but for precisely that reason it must be told. Ame's short and difficult life began in 2000 in rural Pennsylvania. She was the youngest of David and Shirley Deal's 3 children, but it was rumoured at an early point that David may not have been her father. Although the rumour was never proven or disproven, many believed that it ultimately played a major role in her murder. David believed that Shirley had cheated on him, so he resented Ame from the day she was born. The Deals were a poor family, always living on the edge of just barely being able to survive. Neither parent had any real job skills and their education was minimal. Sometimes they were on public assistance, while at other times they relied on the charity of their families because often both David and Shirley were not working. Ame and her siblings were emotionally and educationally well behind other kids their ages, and they often went to school hungry and wearing dirty clothes. Shirley later claimed that David was physically and emotionally abusive toward her when they lived in Pennsylvania, but that things got much worse when they moved to Texas. The Deal family moved to Texas to be closer to David's extended family. Shirley claimed that she thought that David's family would help him find work, and that they would be living in the area, but wouldn't be around every day necessarily. But when they got to Texas, she learned that they would be living in a communal-style arrangement with David's mother, his sister Cynthia Stoltzman, and Stoltzman's adult daughter and her family. Shirley suffered constant physical and emotional abuse at the hands of the extended Deal family until she finally had enough and moved to Kansas. She left her 3 children with the Deals. Life began as a difficult prospect for Ame Deal, and it only got worse once her mother left. The Deal family didn't stay in Texas very long, but long enough for Ame to get an initial dose of what she would face in the coming years. She was for the most part ignored by her father and constantly berated and belittled by her grandmother and aunt. When it was time to feed the children, Ame was forced to eat after her cousins, usually only getting scraps if she was lucky. The extended Deal family never stayed in one place very long. They moved from state to state and from city to city throughout the United States in the 2000s into the early 2010s. The constant moves were difficult for all of the Deal children, who usually were forced to live in squalid conditions no matter where they lived. Although few of the adults in the family worked, none of them seemed very concerned with basic hygiene or their living conditions. They also didn't care much about their children's educations. The children were all homeschooled, if that is what one can call it. Apparently the Deal adults wanted to keep an almost cult-like control over their children, so they refused to send them to public schools, and for the most part they refused to let them associate with children outside of the family. The Deal clan eventually ended up in the Phoenix, Arizona area in the late 2000s, which proved to be where things got exponentially worse for little Ame. Most of the family lived in a house they rented, but Ame was forced to sleep outside in a tent, alone. No doubt Ame suffered immense emotional scars at such a young age as she was essentially abandoned and isolated by her own family. First her mother left, then her father, grandmother, and aunt forced her to sleep outside like a dog or a cat. Cynthia Stoltzman became Ame's legal guardian, but after that things only seemed to get worse for the little girl. She was routinely beaten by Cynthia for the smallest indiscretions. The punishments became a sort of entertainment for the adults in the Deal household. Cynthia's 23-year-old daughter, Samantha Allen, and her same-aged husband John began slapping Amy around as well. Cynthia forced Ame to heat hot sauce and or dog feces if she did something she didn't like, or just because she was bored. She would also make her stand out in the hot Arizona summer sun for hours on end with no water. Due to the squalid conditions that all of the Deals live in, Amy eventually contracted head lice, but it was left untreated, causing scabs and scars on her head. Finally, Samantha devised a particularly cruel form of torture, placing Ame in a small footlocker for hours at a time. In 2011, Ame was 4 feet tall, but the locker was only 3 feet long, which of course meant that the girl would have to contort herself just to fit. Samantha especially liked to make Ame do hundreds of jumping jacks and run around the block several times in the Arizona heat before stuffing her into the trunk. Life was truly a living nightmare for Ame. The general situation at the Deal household was not unknown to their neighbours or the authorities wherever they lived. Child Protective Services were called on numerous occasions after neighbours reported seeing the children wandering the neighbourhood at all hours of the night dirty and dishevelled. The police were also called to the house more than once. On July 12, 2011, the police came to the Deal home one last time. On that day, the police received an anonymous call about a possible assault. When they arrived, they looked around briefly and found the footlocker of torture. They opened it and were horrified to find Ame inside dead, with numerous bruises all over her body. The adults initially told the police that Ame had locked herself inside the locker by accident, but when the police pointed out that the lock was on the outside, they admitted they had locked her in there on purpose as part of a punishment. John and Samantha Allen were charged the next day with first-degree murder. The investigation uncovered the magnitude of the abuse and neglect that was primarily directed at Ame, but all of the other Deal kids suffered to a certain extent. As a result of the investigation, David Deal, Cynthia Stoltzman and grandmother Judith Deal were charged with felony child abuse. All of the Deal adults were remanded to the Maricopa County Jail to face trial. Samantha and John Allen were refused bail, and the others were unable to make bail. The surviving children were taken by Child Protective Services and put in foster homes. As Samantha and John sat in protective custody blocks in the county jail, they received the grim news that the district attorney was pursuing the death penalty against both of them. The lawyers for both Allens attempted to reach plea bargains with the DA that would spare their clients' lives, but the public outcry was too great. They would have to take their chances at trial. Meanwhile, the other members of the Deal family were facing significant prison time, potentially the remainder of their lives considering their ages, on the child abuse charges. David was the first of the family to take a deal, pleading guilty to felony child abuse in July 2013 and receiving a 14-year sentence. Cynthia Stoltzman pleaded guilty in September 2013 and received 24 years in prison and lifetime probation. Judith Deal, the family matriarch, was given a 10-year sentence and lifetime probation. Due to publicity and the nature of the case, the Deals will more than likely have to serve their time in a protective custody block, where they will be confined to their cells for 23 hours a day. There is a good chance that due to their health and ages, one or more of the Deals will die behind bars. The most severe sentences were reserved for John and Samantha, who the courts believe were the most culpable in Ame's death. Samantha went on trial first, and after a short trial where her lawyers put up little defense, she was found guilty and sentenced to death by lethal injection on August 7, 2017. Allen will share death row with 2 other women. John went on trial a couple of months later and was handed the same verdict and sentence as his wife. The 2 will have a few years to think about how they treated Ame before the executioner puts the needle in their arms. Hey friends, thank you for listening to today's story. Make sure to click the notification icon to stay updated on all future narrations. I release new videos twice every day at 10 AM and 8 PM Eastern Time. If you have a story to share, please send it to the email displayed on the screen. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like and leave an encouraging comment. It really helps me keep bringing you more narrations like this. If you'd like to support the channel even more, you can get early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.